5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everyone, we're talking about space debris again this week. Unfortunately, this topic just keeps getting more urgent. For example, due to the recent Russian anti-satellite test that I'm sure you heard about. So my guest this week is Araz Feyzi from Kayhan Space. And Kayhan is a startup that ingests data about space objects, including debris, and provides warnings about potential collisions and guidance for avoidance maneuvers to satellite operators. But I'll let Araz tell you all about that. Enjoy. And just as a reminder, if you enjoy this podcast in general, please leave us a review or rating on your favorite platform, such as Apple Podcasts, so other people can find it. Thank you. Here are a couple of short messages from our sponsors, and then please enjoy my conversation with Araz.
My name is Raphael Rodkin, and I'm an investor and advisor to space companies. Just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing should be taken as investment advice. This podcast is sponsored by Nano Avionics, a satellite manufacturer and mission integrator. Their technologies enable many space companies worldwide to offer services that improve life right here on Earth, such as providing global connectivity, conducting Earth observation, or contributing to scientific discoveries. Check them out, and also check out my episode with the CEO and co-founder. Sadly, I am not a rocket scientist, but I'm an alumnus of the International Space University. ISU offers a number of educational programs about space worldwide. Check them out at isunet.edu.
Hey everybody, so today I'm thrilled to be here, joined by Araz Feyzi, who is the CTO and co-founder of Kayhan Space. Welcome, Araz.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
It's a pleasure, and we're talking about a very important topic, as listeners will find out in a second. So why don't you give us the elevator pitch of Kayhan, and then we'll see what that is.
Yeah, so every hour, billions of dollars worth of space assets are zooming by each other and through a cloud of debris at 20,000 miles an hour. That's 10 times the speed of a bullet. Or, if at that speed, a small fragment hits a satellite, not only will destroy that satellite, but the debris from that satellite, that accident will threaten other assets for generations to come. We're launching order of magnitude more satellites these days compared to the history. And with the congestion that we've seen in orbit, it is becoming impossible, basically, to operate satellites manually. The autonomy that we're building are helping satellite operators run their operations safely and get to orbit faster. Our autonomous satellite collision avoidance solution today is providing service to more than 100 satellites, both in commercial and defense industry. And we're expected to add a lot more this year to our customer base.
Great. So let's maybe take a step back and sort of just, outline sort of the scale of the issue, if you will, right? And so what I mean by that is, as you said, there's more and more satellites in orbit right now. So sort of intuitively, it makes sense, of course, that the more satellites, the higher the probability is of collisions. But sort of like, what is the probability now? Sort of like, whichever way you think is useful to explain that. It could be, there's X satellites in orbit, and, on an average day, we may have, X near misses, and, maybe talk about a little bit of what the near miss actually means, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, let's take a step back and look at some numbers. So since the dawn of space age, we have launched so far somewhere around 11,000 satellites as humanity, all nations combined. Mm-hmm. And that's since 1960s. So about half of those, a little less than half of those are still operational. In the next decade, just in the next decade, we are expected to launch somewhere around 100,000 more satellites into orbit, right? So with that congestion, a lot of trouble that we're facing. So, and most people believe that Earth orbit, or space is unlimited, whereas Earth orbit is what we're really talking about. And more particularly lower Earth orbit, where it's a couple hundred kilometers above Earth, that's usable for most missions. Mm-hmm. In the new study, a recent study came out of UT Austin that predicted that about 95% of carrying capacity of Earth orbit is already taken up by space junk. So imagine having a very limited and finite resource and launching a lot more satellites into it. So that's one aspect of of the story, right? And the other one is that I mentioned earlier, that these speeds, 10 times speed of a bullet, it is a very hyperkinetic event, and if you have a catastrophic accident, it doesn't just stay there. It's not like a car accident that you have a collision and then you can basically take the debris out and then other cars can continue driving. The debris in orbit stays there, depending on which orbit they're in and where the debris is ejected. It can stay there for months all the way through for hundreds of years, and will continue to threaten other assets. So these two combined should tell us a story. One, we cannot afford to have any kind of collisions in orbit because that is just can result in a chain reaction called Kessler syndrome, that debris from one collision can cause another one, and it can render an entire orbital regime unusable for generations to come. And another thing that we need to think about is that anything that needs to go beyond low Earth orbit has to go through low Earth orbit first. Like when you're launching a missile or a mission, a rocket, it goes through the cloud of debris. So it is extremely important for us to make sure that the Earth orbit stays sustainable. Now, with these pieces of debris, it's estimated that there are about 1 million pieces of debris in Earth orbit, and we are only able to track about 30,000 of them today. So again, we are reliably tracking about 30,000 pieces of debris and other objects called resident space objects. They can be operational satellites, defunct satellites, or debris out of estimated about 1 million. So imagine anything larger than a tennis ball. We can see it with our radars or telescopes from the ground.
Just going to ask you, it's basically, I assume what we can see obviously depends on what size it is, right?
Exactly.
So it's about a tennis ball?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about 10 centimeters in diameter, generally speaking. We can see objects smaller than that, but keeping custody of these objects, keeping track of them, right? That is a different story. Algorithms do that, and those are very difficult. Mm-hmm. Now, we have new and modern radars coming online. We have Space Fence that's already up. Once it's operational, it's estimated that we'll be tracking somewhere around 100,000 of those pieces of debris. But still, it's a fraction of what is estimated to be up there, right? And another thing that most people don't realize is that a lot of times we don't know where these objects are exactly because it is just there's what's called an uncertainty around where we think these objects are. Because when you track them from the ground, they're going at those high speeds. They're probably you can imagine in a banana shape or a elongated a cone that we say. We believe that with a high certainty that this particular object is somewhere within this bubble, and when you have conjunctions or close approaches is when two bubbles overlap, and then it's a probabilistic event. So we usually say, okay, so we have a conjunction or we have a close approach, and the probability of collision is 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 100,000. Some people, when they see these numbers, like, oh, that's pretty low, right? 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000. But we have tens of thousands of these events on a daily basis. So if you have tens of thousands of high probability events, it's likely that something will happen, right? It's all probabilistic. So what is safe from NASA perspective? So, NASA believes that if there is a 1 in 10,000 chance of collision, we have to do something about it immediately. If it is somewhere between 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 100,000, it's recommended to do something. It's below 1 in 100,000. We can basically decide to, just wait and see, right? And different companies, since there's no regulation or there's no policy in place, a lot of companies kind of pick and choose their threshold for risk. So some commercial operators have publicly announced that, for example, I believe Starlink said that one E-5. So, 100,000 is when they perform a maneuver.
Okay. And I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, I would have imagined that people obviously prefer to avoid collisions. I mean, certainly the larger the satellite, I guess, the more they want to avoid it because it gets more expensive. What I'm trying to get at is, so because you're saying it's probabilistic, and so I'm kind of imagining, my sort of like my statistics mind, sort of like, two overlapping Gaussian curves, probability distributions, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, people would probably err on the side of making false positive errors, as in like, predict a collision even when there isn't one in the end, rather than the other way around, right?
There's both, but one thing that is very relevant is that a lot of times satellite operators perform maneuvers when the uncertainty is high, just to be on the safe side. So they say, okay, so my probability of collision is 1 in 10,000, or on my missed distance, which is the closest that is predicted these two objects will come near each other, is say it's 150 meters, but the uncertainty is so high that I can't really rely on the solutions, and I don't afford to have a collision. So I'm going to perform a maneuver.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we actually have good data, it helps us avoid maneuvers that are unnecessary, because every unnecessary maneuver that we perform is additional fuel that we've used. So shorter lifespan for the satellite. Mm-hmm. And you have to put your satellite on safe mode in almost every case. And that means you can't do business, right? Yes. So one of the values that we're bringing to this is that we help you only perform maneuvers that are necessary, with a safety net, and avoid performing maneuvers that are not necessary. On the other hand, a lot of times there's not enough data for us to decide intelligently, okay, whether or not I want to do anything. Especially, so for example, when you have two satellites that are coplanars, so their relative velocity is very low. So imagine that basically one is tracking the other. A lot of legacy methods to calculate the probability of collision doesn't work. So in a lot of cases, we don't have a good read on how risky this conjunction is. So with some of our methods that we have, we analyze them different ways, with a statistical model, with simulation, and analytical models, and we can provide more information that helps satellite operators make a informed decision about what to do.
Understood. So I'm still going to come back and still hypothesize that people are being overcautious, but again, it's a question back to you. So let's say everybody used the 1 in 10,000 seems to be a commonly used cutoff from what I understand. So if everybody uses that, it would still imply that sort of like basically, roughly speaking, every 1 in 10,000 times that there is such a warning that there would be an actual collision, which I don't think is the case right now, or is it?
No, it's not. Luckily, we don't have 10,000. We have very lower number of conjunctions that are that high in terms of probability of collision on a daily basis. But if a day comes that, yes, we are having 100,000, 10,000 of these events a day, and then satellite operators don't or can't perform avoidance maneuvers, that can be very catastrophic. And that's what we're worried about, because there are constellations up there. There are many satellites up there that they cannot perform maneuvers, right? Either they don't have propulsion, or they're large pieces of debris or small pieces of debris that, they're defunct. So second stages, or defunct satellites. And that is the real problem. And that is what keeps us up at night. If you continue to launch satellites that are not maneuverable into a very busy orbit, you can very well have, high number of conjunctions where neither of the parties can perform a maneuver. And that is catastrophic. And unfortunately, this needs to be addressed. I don't know if it's a policy perspective or it is, just basically, creating awareness. But yeah, that's a real problem that we have to deal with.
So it actually brings up an interesting side question. And so I'm just going to assume that statistically most conjunction warnings are most conjunction warnings would be between two inactive objects, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, and then followed by one inactive object with an active object, and that probably the conjunction warning between two active objects is probably more the minority case. But what I was going to ask is, so let's pretend we have a conjunction warning between two active objects, and because, as you said, if then it's obviously sufficient if one of these objects makes an avoidance maneuver, right? But whoever makes the avoidance maneuver is going to be the person who suffers the economic loss, so to say. So how is that decided in real life?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The casual way of saying it is that everybody's winging it right now, honestly. So yeah, when you have two operational satellites, so let me take a step back. So conjunctions have been changing very rapidly in different aspects. One of them is, as you said, now these days we're seeing a lot more operational conjunctions, which we didn't see as much back in the past, right? So the difference is that when you have one operational versus one non-operational satellite or a non-maneuverable object, it is easy. Like the decision is made. The one that can maneuver, if there's a need for a maneuver, will perform a maneuver, right? And they don't need to coordinate with anyone. They just know that that this is the trajectory of the secondary or the second object, and I know it with this certainty, and I'm going to do this perform this maneuver. So when you have two operational satellites, multiple things happen that make it even more complicated. One that you mentioned. Okay, so if you have a conjunction between two assets, who moves? How does this negotiation happen? Are there any rules of the road? Or what if one of the two parties doesn't even respond, right? Which all of these are in fact real problems today. Now, imagine a scenario when you have two operational satellites. They don't talk to each other. They can't talk to each other, or they can't get a hold of each other. And then they both decide to perform a maneuver. And then that maneuver that is not coordinated between them actually increases the probability of collision. And this could, and we believe that it is happening quite often these days. Now, what operators have done has been pretty limited. So today, there are very few bilateral kind of or mutual kind of agreements between certain satellite operators. So, for example, SpaceX announced that they've signed an agreement with NASA that they have said, okay, every time a Starlink satellite has a conjunction with a NASA asset, Starlink will perform a maneuver. So NASA doesn't have to worry about it, right? So that's at least they know that, and Starlink does it. But we have hundreds of satellite operators today, soon reaching thousands. So we can't really expect every two satellite operator that are flying in each other's vicinity to put together these agreements, right? And a lot of times it is actually very difficult for operators to get a hold of each other. So imagine you are a satellite operator in the US, you have a conjunction with an operator out of, let's say, just for sake of argument, Europe, they're a new company, and that there's time difference, and then it's a same day event, and then one of the companies can't reach the other one. So they just have to basically make the best guess and perform a maneuver. So with more congestion in space, we can't really run space operations when human is in the loop, because we have shorter lead times for these conjunctions. It's back in the day we used to have 5 to 7 days generally heads up before an event. But just in recent months, anecdotally speaking, we have seen for our clients a large number of same day or maybe 48-hour kind of heads up because of multiple factors that I can get into if you're interested. But yeah, so we have more operational satellite and operational satellite conjunctions and more last minute conjunctions. And when human is in the loop, they have to try to figure out who the other party is, get their input, try to negotiate, come back, plan a maneuver, screen it, make sure that maneuver is not going to cause another accident, and perform it. And by the time they get there, it is happening today. A lot of times it's too late, because by the time you've decided what to do, you only have a small window of opportunity when you have ground coverage to communicate with your satellite. So that is why we recently announced our new product called Pathfinder, which is a autonomous coordinated satellite collision avoidance system. We believe that unless this is done in a machine-to-machine level between operators and through autonomous systems, we can't really have a safe operating environment in orbit in the next couple of years.
Right, but does that then assume that your system is deployed on sort of, let's say, both satellites for that to work correctly?
Yes. So yes and no. So ideally, we would like both parties to use our solution, because that would make things a lot easier. But even if one of the operators is using our solution, we are working on providing a way for non-customer operators to also participate in our platform, because we are providing enough value for both parties to be incentivized to basically play in the system. So even if you don't want to pay for the system, if you don't want to use our maneuvers, at least provide a way for two operators to coordinate with data sharing or setting agreements amongst each other, or setting some rules between themselves, to at least passively provide information and feedback that can help reduce the risk of collisions.
And so the idea, if I understand correctly, would be that at some point in time, this would basically be fully automated. You wouldn't need any humans in the loop to sort of decide whether there is a maneuver or not, and then to execute a maneuver.
That's correct.
Okay, and so how far away are we from that right now?
From a technology perspective, we're not that far out. We are right now, today, our autonomous solution is operational for an operational satellite versus a non-maneuverable object. So basically what it means is that we assume that our secondary, if our secondary is not going to move or perform maneuver, our autonomous solution today generates feasible solutions, screens them, and provides the maneuver plan through a command file that can be uploaded to satellite today. The only piece that is intentionally held is manual is the part where the customer downloads the command file and uploads it to satellite, and that's intentional, right? Because just we believe that is our way of kind of putting human on the loop, not in the loop. So we have that already built, and that's operational today. Now, the coordinated autonomy, our target is to launch that in Q3 of this year, the latest. And with that, we will continue to add that, have that final approval by the operator. But I mean, once the system is up and running, we believe that once the ecosystem allows us, we can switch, basically turn on the autonomy and don't rely on humans, or we only just kind of limit the human intervention to when you want to kind of cancel a maneuver or override a system decision.
And so let's just dig a little bit deeper for one moment in sort of, let's call it unpredictable event. There's, I guess, on the one end of the spectrum, we have objects which are well tracked, and then it's basically astrodynamics. You kind of know very far in advance when there would be a possible conjunction, right? And is that sort of the main case, or is there also like a lot of cases where you didn't really know there was an object, or maybe you just got it wrong and then it gets picked up by a sensor, and some more unpredictable cases?
Yeah. So we have more and more of the latter type these days. So what I mean by that is that first of all, there are collisions or incidents that happen that we never detected them prior to them happening because the object's too small or it's not well tracked. A couple months ago, when a small piece of debris pierced through the Canadian robotic arm of .ISS, right? Yeah. Or there was a Chinese satellite that stopped working, and then later was we realized that there was a breakup. So there was an untracked or poorly tracked piece of debris had a collision with that satellite. More recently, we're having more and more of the kind of late notices or last minute notifications for a number of reasons. One is that now we have started tracking smaller objects with better radars, but maybe the tracking is not that good yet. So we see the objects, but we can't keep custody of them for too long, or the uncertainty is that high. So that could result in kind of last minute detection of the conjunctions. The other one is that now that we have a lot of satellites in orbit that perform maneuvers, that reduces the predictability of the trajectory when you are a third party just monitoring you, right? So imagine I track you over a radar pass today, and then between this pass and the next pass, which is in a couple of hours, you perform a maneuver. And then you come in and I track you again. You haven't told me that you performed a maneuver, and the algorithms associate those objects, but they say, okay, so I thought you were going to be here, but you're here now. So now that affects the kind of the precision of tracking. Now, one of the really important things is for ground systems that are tracking these objects to know about the upcoming maneuvers and also maneuvers that have been performed in the past.
So this is, sorry to interrupt, this is kind of interesting to me. I didn't realize that. I sort of, for some reason, thought that we were moving towards correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume with aircraft, sort of, because they have transponders and they're in constant contact with air traffic control, sort of like air traffic control presumably knows where they are at any given point in time, right?
Yeah, so if you have a GPS on board, and if you're analyzing your GPS data and you're using that for orbit determination, you as an operator know very precisely where you are. Now, more and more satellites in LEO have GPS these days. It's small and it's gotten to a place where it's very affordable to have it, or very feasible to have it on basically CubeSats. But the problem is that you as an operator know where you are, but does U.S. Space Command know where you are? Do you communicate that with them? Because as a third party, they use their tracker, their sensors to track you. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of these operators are not necessarily communicating these maneuvers with the broader community.
But as I say, do you think there should be like a situation or some sort of setup where everybody should just at all times basically provide telemetry to like some central pool that anybody can access? I mean, Do you think that should happen? Do you think that will happen? Or
we definitely hope to make that a reality as a commercial solution, and that's something that we're working through. But obviously, there are a lot of considerations, right? So a lot of some satellite operators may not feel comfortable sharing their plans, and from various reasons, commercial or defense or
military, of course, yeah.
Military reasons, right? That is one, and the other one is that we are talking. It's not with air traffic control. We have we have territories. Like if you're flying over U.S. airspace, U.S. has authority over the airspace, but in space, there's no authority. Like it's a global, it's an international operating field, and not everybody is on the same page around how we're going to work with each other, right? So we have so it is a contested and congested environment. So it's very difficult to set up rules that are agreed upon, and unfortunately we're behind on that, right? So right now we're doing a lot of work on our side, working with international community, with with media, with policymakers to try to raise awareness. But we have to, as humanity, we have to get together and set up some basic rules. That's, hey, look, if at least in cases when there's danger for other operators' assets, we have to do data sharing. Hopefully, we'll get there at some point, and we should get there. If you want to be able to have a sustainable Earth environment, we're not there today, not at all.
Yeah, but I just realized you made a good point. Sort of, okay, air traffic. You have sort of like, okay, in which airspace are you? Maybe the better comparison I should have used is sort of like the oceans and shipping, right? Where you have and many listeners may not even know that you have these what's called AIS transponders, right? So automatic identification systems, where ships basically are supposed to identify themselves and communicate to each other where they are. I think partly actually to avoid collisions.
Yeah, it's a very good example. There are a couple of similarities, but big differences. As we know, a lot of times ships have the option to turn it off, and they sure do that just to kind of stay under the radar.
Yeah.
And also, so that's happening, and you can imagine that all these satellites are flying with their transponders off now. That's a comparison with the space. Another one is that with the ocean, with ships, we're talking about very low velocity kind of events, right? So. Yeah. Even if it, obviously not at night, but like during the day, simply you can see another ship coming at you.
And plus, you don't have debris from old ships flying around.
Right, exactly. Right, but in orbit, the object that you're going to have a conjunction with, in about 5 hours, it may be 3 rotations away behind Earth right now, right? So because smaller object and lower Earth orbit, you're going around. Rough rule of thumb, about 90 minutes. So the object is 3 rotations on the other side of the Earth. So there's some differences, but yeah, I think that's a good example that unless we if you had a very fast ships in a very congested area, and then if you had vessels that turned off their transponders, it would have been very dangerous, and that's where we are right now in space.
Okay, you've mentioned sort of radar as an example of one tracking methodology a few times, and maybe I thought maybe we'll spend a couple of minutes if you can just walk through what are the main ways we're actually tracking these objects, because you guys. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are not actually collecting the data, you're producing the data yourselves, right? You're ingesting data and basically providing insights, right? But so who's generating the data, and like what are sort of the key technologies we use at the moment and in the near future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, we're not a data provider. We don't have our sensors. So there are multiple ways. There are different ways of tracking these objects as a third party. The most common one, especially for low Earth orbit, radar is the most commonly used technology. So. The largest network of ground radars belongs to U.S. government. It's called SSN, Space Surveillance Network. Mm-hmm. It was originally developed to protect against ballistic missiles, to detect and protect against those. But as byproduct of that, we were able to see satellites and other pieces of debris in orbit. So they basically kind of fell on their lap, and now they have the largest catalog of tracked objects in orbit. But for objects that are in higher altitudes, we generally use telescopes to track objects, as well as there is passive RF. So based on if that there's a certain asset that is transmitting at a certain frequency. You can use ground stations to use and use passive RF to kind of find their or track them. There's ranging with ground stations as well as with lasers. So there are different ways. But generally, vast majority of the objects today are tracked by ground radar. So these are multiple radars that are placed strategically around the globe. There are commercial solutions like LeoLab that do that. And but the largest catalog today belongs to Space Surveys Network.
So it seems like it's basically mostly, if not all, from the ground right now. Do you see us doing this from space in the future, and is there a benefit to that?
Yes, absolutely. So by the way, just I forgot to mention the European Space Agency's EU SSD, which is also a very robust set of radars and ground sensors that track these objects. Mm-hmm. Yes. So one of the reasons that we are only tracking, just only a fraction of estimated pieces of debris in orbit is that a lot of these objects are too small, and it's very difficult to find them with radars. I mean, how much energy can you put behind a radar before causing trouble for other assets, right? Sure. So there are limitations there, and a new kind of wave of technologies that are coming out with satellites that are doing RPO or they have really good sensors on board. We are actually a lot of companies. We actually do have a contract with a partner with U.S. government. We were awarded a SBIR contract from U.S. Air Force to do feasibility study on this. Mm-hmm. Is that we use these in orbit asset sensors to try to do one of the two. So either detect and track objects that are not tracked today. That's one thing. And the second one is that to better track some objects that we're tracking today, but they're not very well tracked. So the uncertainty is high for them. So imagine, you have a large piece of secondary that because of orbit or for whatever reason, it's not very well tracked. We can use these in orbit assets to kind of do a better job of tracking it. Now there are technologies that rely on like radar or LiDAR or cameras to see and track these objects. I don't believe there's a solution that's working today out there, but mm-hmm. we know of a handful of companies that are working toward that, and we are partnering with one of these companies today.
Excellent. Okay, so there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon. So where are you guys right now? So your product is live, right? And so you are sort of in the scaling up phase, finding more customers. Is that where you are?
Yes, we launched our commercial solution earlier this year, and we provide service, as I mentioned, to multiple commercial and government customers. We have over 100 satellites that we provide service to. Mm-hmm. And we recently announced our new product, which we call Pathfinder, is the coordinated autonomous collision avoidance. Next year, our focus is going to be developing and bringing that product to market while we're expanding our current solution to more satellite operators globally. On the other side, we're working very closely with governments around the world to develop more advanced technologies to improve the tracking quality for orbital debris. As an example, we have a contract with U.S. government to improve the accuracy of what's called HASDA model. That it is used as high accuracy drag model that is used to better estimate the space weather data, mm-hmm. To improve the tracking of the debris and also assets that are in low Earth orbit. So it's a very exciting year ahead of us with the increased number of launch providers, with the increased number of launches and more satellites. So we're really excited to do as much as we can to make spaceflight safer.
Terrific. And your customers, I assume, are basically probably paying on some sort of, let's call it subscription basis, right, per satellite or something like that.
Yes. So we are a software only solution, and we're providing our solution under software as a service method. So we charge by satellite by month. And depending on what tier of service our customers are opting into and the constellation size and a couple other factors, the price varies.
Understood. Okay, I only have 3 final questions for you. So one is, so you seem to be in a very exciting moment of growth. Sort of, first question is, are you hiring at the moment?
We just finished. We just doubled the size of our engineering team. We are always hiring. We are looking for talent in astrodynamics. We're looking for amazing data scientists and software engineers. But yeah, we have we post our openings on our website, Kayhan.space. And yeah, we're always hiring. So perfect. If you're excited about
put the site in the notes as well.
Yeah.
And then I was wondering if you weren't doing Kayhan, is there something else you find very fascinating in space that you would be doing as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, we're so focused on this that we haven't really that I haven't really thought about any vastly different topic. But honestly, I think I think there's a lot of room for. All right, let me take a step back. So just like Gold Rush, it was a new industry, right? There was a new initiative, and we had a lot of call it entrepreneurs and people who wanted to take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of a sort of gold rush moment. It's a second wave of space. I guess it's a very exciting phase for space. But a lot of these companies that want to get to space have to do a lot of the work internally. One analogy I like to use is that imagine you're a car company and you have to build everything almost in-house from wheels to the engine. I think one of the things that I would do if I was not doing Kayhan is to kind of look for opportunities where you can productionize common technologies that are used among other vast majority of the operators to increase the pace of development and pace of innovation in space. And I keep going back to data, and I think data is a big bottleneck. If we can bring more data, provide more data, and provide more tools as out-of-the-box solutions, I think we're just helping space economy grow much faster.
Scale faster. I agree. Okay, and then the final question, as always, is about sci-fi and any sort of favorite science fiction. I guess the one thing with space debris that comes to mind is Gravity, but I mean beyond that, sort of in general about science fiction, any favorites?
Yeah, I've now that you're asking, it comes to mind. I find myself watching and reading a lot about interplanetary trips and colonization of other planets. That's what I've been reading, because even though it's science fiction today, we have a clear path to get there. So that is one of my favorite topics. It helps. I feel like subconsciously it helps me think how the future will look like and kind of prepare for it. But multiplanetary colonization is what I've been reading and watching lately.
That's terrific. And of course, the good thing of sort of in the interplanetary side, at least for the moment, we haven't sort of clocked that up with debris yet. Unfortunately, we'll be able to sort of leave the Earth, go through the debris, and actually get to the interplanetary trajectory.
Yes. And one interesting thing that I think most people probably miss it is that, there are a couple of satellites that are flying around Mars. About a month ago, 2 of the satellites actually had a conjunction, and one of them had to perform a maneuver. And I believe it was the I can't remember the name. I think it was Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter versus the satellite that was launched by India recently. I believe they had a conjunction, and they had to I believe the satellite that belonged to India had to perform a maneuver. But yeah, we are. We've already started thinking about cislunar.
I was gonna say, I hope we're not going to clog up the moon and everything.
I know. Yeah, I know there are the conversations already how we're going to track objects and debris in cislunar environments. So yeah, we'll get there if you're not careful.
And you guys will be there. So again, Araz, thank you very much for the conversation. As I said at the beginning, I think what the work you guys are doing is really important to keep our continued access to space. And so good luck with everything and your continued growth of the company. And it'll be interesting to kind of do this again in a couple of years or so and see exactly how clogged up the space has become.
Yes, thank you very much. To do that. Hopefully, we'll be in a much better place than we are today. Yeah, this was a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for another nominal episode of the Space Business Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving it a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, such as iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_space. Also consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/spacebusinesspodcast. If the podcast got you interested in learning more about the business opportunities in the space economy, check out my new online course on space entrepreneurship on udemy.com. The link is in the episode description. Lastly, if you have any feedback, including ideas for guests, and that may include yourself if you have an exciting space story to tell, or interested in being a sponsor, drop us an email at spacebusinesspodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to seeing you for the next episode.